What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Ghost in the Night, a hauntings and paranormal podcast. In today's episode, I have a very special guest. I have psychic medium and author Susan E. Rogers. Now, she has recently written a book entitled Uncovering Norman, Proving the Former Life of a Ghost. It's a fascinating book. She's a fascinating interview. I really enjoyed speaking with her, so you're going to want to listen to this. Let's just jump right into the podcast. Ghost in the Night with Phil Sams. All right, on the phone we have Susan Rogers. She is an author and has written a book called Uncovering Norman, Proving the Former Life of a Ghost. Now, hi Susan, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Sure, you're welcome.
So tell me a little bit about what caused you or made you want to write this book on uncovering Norman.
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer. It just wasn't something that I was able to do during my life, but I've always kind of had a good talent for writing, and it just led me to that point. After I met Norman, who's the ghost in the book, he kind of led me along, and we worked together. What happened was he told me pieces of his life, and I researched them, which is proving his life. And we got to a certain point in our friendship, and he said, I think it's time for you to write this all down. It's time for you to become an author. And that's what led me to write the book.
Sorry, everybody. I'm a little under the weather today, so I might cough a little bit. Now, Norman is your spirit guide or spirit friend, I believe you categorize him as, correct?
Yes, he is a spirit guide. He is the spirit of a person who was formerly alive, yes.
When did you first come in contact with, or when did you first have an interaction with Norman?
The first time that I had any interaction with him was in October of 2013. And it was just kind of a little whisper of a breeze, a little tug on the hair, a little tap on the shoulder, and there was nobody around. There was nobody there. And I just knew it wasn't coincidence. I just knew. I've had this psychic gift, this ability for all my life, even though many years it was suppressed. But in the past few years, I've kind of allowed it to come forth and really encouraged it. So by that time, I knew that this was a spirit that was trying to contact me.
Now, go into a little bit. Now, the book basically, from the title, it's you found your spirit guide, Norman, and you went out to prove his actual existence in the real world when he was alive. Was that when you first met Norman? Did you say, okay, I need to go back and find out about his life?
It took a while. It was a few months before he actually started to give me information about his life. Mostly that first few months, he just kind of made contact, kind of introduced himself. It was just kind of, I guess, letting me feel comfortable with him being around is what he had in mind. And it wasn't until a few months later that he started giving me actual psychic messages that were pieces of information about his life when he was a real person. And that's when I started trying to prove that he really was the person he was telling me he was.
Really? I've always, I've heard of the term spirit guide before, and I've always kind of wondered, I never asked anybody that had one or had that kind of interaction with them,
did you actually go back to try and prove this person or this spirit was a person in real life? You know, it's just something I've never heard anybody else talk about, which is really fascinating to me. I think that would be, I know if I was in that situation, I definitely would want to say, okay, I need to have some proof. That way I know I'm not crazy, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not really a skeptic. I am a true believer. I do believe in spirits and, afterlife and reincarnation and all that. But there are many people who are skeptics.
Right, exactly.
And, it was what we wanted to do, Norman and I,
right,
to prove that he was real.
Now, did Norman tell you or express to you why he chose you or picked you out of the crowd?
He did, actually, and it's kind of fascinating. He told me that we had been together in past lives. Both had been reincarnated and had spent time together in one form or another in past lives, and that we missed each other this time. He lived before I was, he was born well before I was born, and I never knew him here.
Right.
But he told me that him coming back as a spirit and as a guide for me was because we missed each other. It was our purpose this time to be together, as me as a person and him as my spirit guide.
Really?
And a spirit guide really is somebody who, it's a spirit or a ghost or any one of a number of different entities that come forward and help you through a difficult time in your life or help you to achieve a purpose in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would liken it to maybe a guardian angel.
Yeah, that was the word that popped into my head when we first started discussing coming on the podcast, and then right before we got you on, I was like, it almost is a spirit guide really, because I'm kind of ignorant when it comes to the spirit guide. The only thing I know about them is what I've seen on TV. Some of these shows that have had psychics on that had a spirit guide. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I didn't know exactly how it worked.
Yeah. So Norman's purpose in coming to me was I was in a very early stage of recognizing and developing my psychic abilities, and at that point in time, and although I had them all my life, as I said, I had kind of suppressed them. So his purpose, he told me, was in coming to help me develop my psychic abilities by, psychically talking with him. And to kind of help me get on track with all that stuff.
Really? I mean, does he kind of, keep you, look out for you in the sense that, okay, you're walking down the street and all of a sudden he may tell you stop and then a car goes by? I mean, does he look out for you in that way, or?
Not in such mundane ways.
Right.
There's one chapter in the book, I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, there was a nightclub shooting in Cincinnati or somewhere in Ohio.
Right, yeah. I'm out of Cincinnati, so I remember.
And there's one chapter in the book that he was, my boyfriend and I were at a local establishment, and he was trying to warn me that something terrible was going to happen. Now, it didn't happen at our club, but it was the same night that it happened at that club.
Right.
So he, it was interesting that it didn't quite get it right, but it was close.
Right, yeah, because there's actually been two here in the past couple of years, that I can recall, and the one that I believe you're referring to actually happened. It's only about 10 miles down the road from me, and I've actually.
Oh wow!
I've been to that bar, but it was it had changed hands and changed names. It was probably, I think I went to it the last time I was there under the old owners. It was probably 2012-ish, and it changed hands and opened up as another bar, and I hadn't been there since, but like, whoa, I've been there. It's kind of a weird feeling when something like that happens and it's a place you have visited at some point. It was like, oh wow. But yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I know exactly what you mean because I was in New York City down near the Twin Towers 2 weeks before 9/11.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So I do understand what you mean.
Yeah, that's one of those events people of our age, my youngest daughter was born I wasn't even born yet. She was born a year later, but that's one of those events that, you know where you were at exactly. It's burned in your mind where you were at when you first heard the news or whatever. It's, it only happens probably once a lifetime, or each generation has one event, but that's, that's our generation's kind of event that
it is. Absolutely.
To where my mother's was like the Kennedy's assassination, but, that's ours. Yeah. How did you exactly, you have some, how did you actually go about finding out exactly about Norman's life? Where did you direct because you mentioned that he's had several lives and you've been together in different lives. How did you go about essentially proving his real life's existence?
Well, I've also done genealogy, family tree research, and I've been doing that since 1981.
Okay.
So I transferred kind of that skill from doing the family tree research to proving facts about Norman's life. So I went into census records, birth, marriage, death records, probate, deeds, whatever his military records, whatever I could find that was available that I was aware of, because doing my genealogy, I went through all those avenues to prove the bits and pieces that he told me about certain times and things of his life. So I actually was able to prove many facts of his life from his birth, which is right here where I live, to his death, which was somewhere totally not here. It was in a different place in the country.
Right. Now, you mentioned he had several lives. He's been reincarnated, and you guys been together now. How far or how many lives were you able to go back and kind of find evidence of him in the past?
Yeah. Actually, the second part of the book, the first part is about me meeting Norman and, doing all of this about his life here. The second part of the book is about a past life that he told me about, that we were together in medieval Bavaria, Germany.
Okay.
In the 1200s. Now, I tried to use the same skills with genealogy, but of course, all the record sets are completely different than what they would be. There's no census records back in the 1200s in Germany. As a matter of fact, there are very few records. And so what I did was, as he told me bits and pieces about our life together, and other messages that I got, I'm also an Akashic Records practitioner. I don't know if you know what that means, but
no, you have to explain that as soon as you get the story, because you've lost me. You've went way over my head now.
Briefly, the Akashic Records is, if you think of it as kind of that great library in the heavens where everybody has a book.
Okay.
And everything about you and everything about all of your lives and anything that ever happens to you, past, present, and future, is kind of written in that book.
Wow. Okay.
So I am a certified master practitioner in the Akashic Records, which means that I can, using my psychic abilities, I can go into the Akashic Records and look at my own book, so to speak, or I can help other people by looking at their volumes. So I use that technique as well as my messages from Norman to explore this past life in the 1200s in Germany. And so the information that I got about our life, although I couldn't prove a great deal of fact, like births and marriages and so on, I could prove that what I was told in my psychic messages actually fit the context. It could have happened. It was very plausible. There were other events that occurred, or the social and economic situation that we were in was a very real one.
Okay, yeah.
So it's kind of the circumstances I could prove, but not our actual lives.
Right. Now, did he tell you kind of what kind of relationship you had? Were you family? Were you together in a romantic way? Or did he give, what was your interaction in that medieval time with him?
We were brother and sister.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I've been through a couple of other past lives, and very frequently Norman and I were brother and sister
Okay.
in those back lives.
Really?
Mm.
That's, it's fascinating stuff. I've always kind of wondered about reincarnation and, or how, when we pass on to the next life, do those things come back and we actually, because if I've been in the past life, I don't know about it. It's blocked from my memory, I guess. But when I pass on and move on to the next plane, will all that be opened up to me and let me know if, I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't know. I have no experience. I don't have your abilities. So all I know is what I have and what's in my brain. But I've always wondered, when do we get that information if that is the case?
Yeah, and I can tell you my own experience. I mean, everyone's experience might be a little different. My own experience in dealing with that kind of space between lives is that it's your soul, the essence of yourself, your soul, that travels from life to life. And in between lives, your soul goes to this, I don't know, heaven, heart space, whatever, soul space, someplace out there in the universe where it can think about, or the soul can think about what has just happened in this life it just left.
Yeah.
And very often what we believe, those of us who believe in this type of reincarnation, is that the soul decides we have lessons to learn.
Okay.
And so it chooses what our next life will be and what opportunities we will be given to learn that lesson.
Right.
So, for example, and this is going to be an extreme example, but I think people can understand it easier. If you are a murderer in this life and you take someone's life, then in the next life, somehow you will lose control of your life, whether you are murdered or you are tortured, or somehow you will be made to understand what the consequences were of you taking that person's life, because you will be on the receiving end in the next life.
So it's kind of like karma, if it doesn't get you in this life, it's going to get you in the next life.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Lessons to be learned.
Right.
Yeah. And most often they're not that extreme.
Right. Yeah.
But it's an easy way to understand it.
Right. Now, has Norman given you any indication of, how often the reincarnation process takes place? I mean, will there come a time when, he'll be gone and he's started a new life here on Earth?
It is very possible. I think that my understanding, and I think what most people believe who understand and believe in reincarnation, is that there are probably millions of lives.
Right.
And your soul continues on learning these lessons until it becomes so perfect. There are no more lessons to be learned.
Right.
And so then it kind of goes off. And I think that's where the Christian concept of heaven,
right,
or the Judeo-Christian concept of heaven comes in, that you become this perfect being who no longer needs to keep learning those hard lessons.
Right. And
I think there are other religions as well that have that concept, nirvana, in the Buddhist realm and so on. So each of the major religions kind of has their own process, but they all kind of share a little bit.
Right. It kind of blows your mind away, thinking about.
It does.
Thinking
definitely.
about that. It's not maybe as cut and dry as you're born, you live your life, try to do the best you can, you pass away, and then it's over, and you move on to the next stage of your existence. Maybe like you said, it makes sense to me that there's no possible way we can learn everything we need to learn about our essence and the essence of the universe in one life. It takes several lives to kind of figure it out. And some of us, like me, probably slow learners, it might take a few extra.
I think it takes everybody a long time.
Right.
It's not an easy process.
Right. Now, do you use your spirit guide? Do you do anything else with your spirit guide? Like, I know some people kind of go on investigations. Some people kind of maybe even help the police. Or do you do anything with you and Norman? Do anything like it?
I have been contacted by a number of other spirits. I'm contacted by spirits all the time.
Right.
Some are very, and I don't mean to use this lightly, but they're inconsequential. They
Right.
kind of contact me and say, "Hi, I'm a spirit. How you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
I never hear from them again. And others, like Norman, have a significant purpose for me in my life. I have heard from some spirits of, for example, a young woman who was murdered. She tells me she was murdered in Key West.
Really?
I have been trying to track that down. The consequences of that are phenomenal, because if I am able to prove that, she told me her name was Rose, if I am able to prove that Rose really was murdered, and then I can go to the police, or I can go to her family or whatever. To me, for me, the
Right.
consequences of that are tremendous.
Right.
I haven't been able to prove her yet.
Okay.
Although I did have one, I was on one of those ghost tour things
Mm-hmm.
in Key West, and the guide who was leading the tour did tell me that where I got the message from Rose, there had been a body found and buried under the basement in this house. But I
Really?
haven't been able to confirm that other than what he told me.
Right.
So some of these may take a lifetime to try to
Right.
figure out. Some I may never be able to figure out. But I'm working on a second book now, and I have the spirit of a Civil War soldier who committed suicide after the atrocities when he came back after the Civil War,
Right.
came back home. I'm working on proving him, and I've gotten quite a ways into working on his life. Again, using the same kind of genealogy technique. I also have a young man who was a first mate on a whaling ship out of New Bedford, Massachusetts, back in the 1840s, and he drowned
Right.
when his boat swamped. So again, another spirit that came to me with a traumatic story. These are really traumatic stories, and I was a social worker. I'm retired now, but my career was as a social worker, and I just have to think that I'm no longer helping, people in my career as a social worker. Now I'm doing social work for ghosts.
Right.
It's kind of an odd twist, but it really feels that way.
Right. Now, one kind of question I have: does Norman look out for you in the sense of there's definitely evil presences, evil ghosts? If I could speak today,
Mm-hmm.
evil ghosts or even demonic ghost or demonic spirits out there. Does he kind of look out for you and kind of make sure those don't pass through and make contact with you? Or does he at least tell you when, okay, you're dealing with something maybe that's not really nice or not even human?
Yeah, he does. He doesn't really physically protect me,
Right.
but he does let me know.
Right.
If I should be careful, or he'll kind of, don't deal with that. Close them off.
Right.
I'll get that sense from him. He doesn't actually intervene. I could still choose to do what I wanted to do, but he definitely lets me know if he senses that there's a problem
Right.
or an evil presence.
Now, does he show himself to you? Do you see him in your mind's eye, or is he able to physically manifest himself to show himself to you, or is it just all telepathic interactions between you?
I actually have had a couple of physical manifestations. Most often I see him as a vision or an image in my mind.
Okay.
But he has manifested himself in a couple of physical ways to me. When I first met him, so to speak, I would always know when he was there because it was kind of a disturbance in the air, kind of like if you're looking off in the distance at a heat wave, that kind of waviness in the air.
Yeah.
That's how he presents himself when we first started. And then after and I did put a photo in the book, he kind of made an image of himself in the condensation of a glass sliding door.
Okay.
You can imagine that.
Really? Yeah. I mean,
and there's just kind of a photo of that in the book, the best I could make it. But,
right.
Yeah, so those are a couple of physical manifestations, and then as I said, I have seen him in my mind.
Right. Yeah. How long did it take you to write this book? I mean, I know it was an extensive process in doing the research. What kind of time frame are you looking at from when you first met Norman to learning more about him to actually doing the research and then writing the book? How long was the process?
Yeah, I first met him in 2013, and it wasn't for maybe almost a year before he actually started giving me information to work with. So from 2014, I started writing, actually putting things on, sentences on paper in October of 2017.
Okay.
So in between there, I was doing the research and I was following up in the records and searching for what he told me to make it validated.
Right.
And then I actually started writing in October of 2017, and probably took me, because I had everything already and I already had it in my head, it was probably about 6 weeks when I actually finished typing.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, was the process for getting, you're with a publisher, correct?
I actually have a publisher. It's a self-published book, but it's through a self-publishing division of a larger publishing house.
So we really was that a pretty hard process to get them to, now I'm assuming they do some help, publicizing and getting your name out there a little bit.
They do. It's called Balboa Press, and they offer self-publishing packages. I don't have a lot of money, so I had to go with the cheapest one there was.
Right.
But because I'm pretty proficient in terms of writing, I've always, been doing a lot of self-editing. And then my boyfriend is also a very good editor. Okay. So between the two of us, we did the editing and rewriting and that needed to be done. Balboa Press really doesn't accept or reject. The only thing they will do is they will read the book for content. And it's to make sure that it's something they want to put their name on.
Right.
So that's the extent of that. And they do offer editing services, but like I said, we did it ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
They did help with some marketing, and with the design and layout.
Right.
So that's kind of what the package involves.
Now, I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish up. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So that's, when you purchase a package from them for self-publishing, they are helping you. You're not doing every step of the way all by yourself.
Now, what kind of reaction have you had to the book so far? And it kind of leads into your boyfriend. When you first told him about this, was he accepting, or did he kind of look at you like, okay, I might want to rethink this whole thing?
Actually, pretty early on, I actually met him reading his tarot cards.
Oh, okay.
He asked to read tarot cards for him, and that's how we met. So right from the beginning, he kind of knew that I was a little different. Right. So when I started to tell him about Norman, he was very accepting of it. A little skeptical, maybe, like, oh, yes, here she goes. Right. But as I was able to do more and more proof, and he says he can always tell when I'm interacting with a spirit because I go into kind of this zoned out look. I'm just not present in the present. I'm gone.
Right.
And so he can recognize that, and he knows when he always knows when I'm involved in interacting with a spirit. So he would know when I was kind of talking to Norman, and he would make sure I didn't get interrupted, and he would kind of, be protective of me when I was in that zone.
Well, that's good.
So, yeah, he's good with it.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Because even with what I do, just talking about the paranormal, and sometimes I kind of get some looks like, really, you're an adult. I think it's time to grow up a little bit. So it's good that you found somebody that is actually accepting and willing to help, and is understanding, essentially.
Yeah. And I always tell people that, not everything that happens is related to a spirit. Sometimes the light flickers because you got a short circuit in the wire.
Right.
I mean, it's not always because there's a spirit in the room.
That's right.
You have to be real about it.
Right. I've been on several, paranormal investigations, and, that's why one thing about the show is I was like, really? 90% of what you experience or you hear can be explained, or there's probably a reason for it. Just because you don't understand the reason for it doesn't mean that it's actual paranormals, or any picture you've taken, or I've taken, doesn't mean it's just because there's something on there that I can't explain. Doesn't mean it's a spirit or whatever. It just means I can't explain it. It's interesting, but it's not definitive proof. So, and like I was having a conversation with somebody, if I had to guess, it'd be 80 to 90% of paranormal experience or evidence really can be explained. It's that 10% that's kind of, you have to look for.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to do a different way of proving that my ghost existed.
Right. And
I never knew Norman. I didn't know Norman. I knew nothing about him. I never even knew he existed in a real life until he contacted me as a ghost. Right. And then, being able to prove the facts that he told me, as he told me, made a believer out of me.
Right.
There will always be skeptics. There will always be naysayers. You're not going to be able to satisfy them no matter what, ever. And that's okay. That's okay.
Right.
I don't need to do that.
Right. That's all you can do is just prove what you can. And really, I love the way you went about it. You have experience with, digging into records, and it must have been a joy when you first got that proof that, okay, Norman actually existed at some point, and I
was so excited.
Right.
You can't imagine how excited I was.
Right.
Yes.
So we're going to wrap it up here. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can find the book. I'm sure it's on Amazon, but what are all the links, or where can they find your book?
Okay. It is on Amazon, and it's available in both print version and as an ebook. It's on Barnes & Noble as well. You can order it from Balboa Press. If you just Google that, Balboa Press, they'll come up, and just click on the tabs for bookstore and search. You can search on all of them if you put in Uncovering Norman as a phrase, or if you put in my name, Susan E. Rogers, as the author. Okay. And it will come up on all of those.
Well, best of luck to you on this book. And when can they expect, you have plans? How close are you to your next book? Are you getting close, or when are you looking to release the next book?
I've set a goal for myself of next September. I think I may be done before then. So maybe next summer.
Okay.
I'll have it on the shelf.
Everybody should be go out and get Uncovering Norman, and then be on the lookout, hopefully mid to late summer or even fall, of your next book. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed speaking with you. It was enlightening, to say the least.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care. You have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There you have it. That was my interview with Susan. Be sure to look in the show notes for all the places you can get this book. Go ahead, give it a read, and look for more books coming from her in the future. And also, don't be surprised if you don't see her again on this podcast. So, until next week, take care.